Yo, what's up everybody, it's Fright Delight and let's talk about Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, made in 1982. This is when movies like The Thing, Poltergeist, and Rocky 3 were made. The film is about a doctor trying to stop something horrible from happening when he uncovers the secret to the silver shamrock mask being shown on TV to the nation's children. Halloween 3 is the obvious black sheep of the franchise, and rightfully so. If you haven't seen the thousands of other YouTube channels talking about it, the original idea for Halloween after part 2 was for it to be an anthology series with a different premise coming every year. Now it actually sounds like a good idea. The only issue is the majority of people that went to see this movie came to see Michael Myers, which leads me to the general reception of the film. As far as I can tell, the people that did not like this movie, of course didn't like it because where the fuck is Michael Myers? But besides that, some other common things I've seen people dislike this film for was the pacing, the cinematography being just as boring as the characters, and this movie should have never been called Halloween to begin with. Another reason somebody thought it was terrible, which was funny to me, is that there isn't a witch. Now, some of the positives I've seen for the film is one, the film has a fresh take on Halloween themed horror. It has its own unique identity in the franchise. I mean, of course it would. And another positive I've seen was the soundtrack enhances the eerie feel to the movie. Well, you'll know how I feel after I recap the movie while giving a couple of thoughts and opinions in between. Now let's stop playing and uncover a secret together. The movie starts off with this guy running away from this car in panic. Is he trying to get away from Christine? Oh, never mind, that ain't no Plymouth Fury. Anyways, the name of the dude trying to get away is Harry. He hides out trying to stay clear of who's ever in the car, but gets caught up moments later by this mysterious guy that almost looks like a pixie fairy. Just before Harry gets choked to death, he maneuvers his way out the situation, killing the suit dude in an unintentionally funny way. The car slowly rolls towards the man as he looks at it with no sense of concern and gets murked instantly. I bust out laughing during this scene. How the hell do you die in such a weak way? After Harry runs off, we catch up with him an hour later, having just enough energy to drop dead in front of a mechanic pulling out a mysterious Halloween mask at the same time. Not long later, we meet our main character, Dr. Daniel. The man is a playboy through almost the whole movie, and you can't tell me otherwise. He's also out of touch with his kids too, getting them cheap Halloween masks when they already have some. As he's about to catch up with his ex-wife, he gets a call to work, so he slides there as his kids watch this mysterious commercial. When Dan pulls up to the hospital, he sees a dead Harry. Oh, never mind, he ain't dead. He wakes up as soon as that mysterious commercial comes on, talking about how they're gonna kill us all. Dr. Dan puts him under, then slides down the hallway flirting with one of the nurses.
I think I should have married you, Agnes.
As Dr. Dan the man falls asleep, one of the suit-wearing fiends walks quietly towards Harry's room undetected by any of the staff. He catches up to Harry like a bad decision and damn near pulls his nose off his face. He wipes his hands and bounces to the car, but not before one of the nurses catches him, screaming and waking up Dr. Dan. Dan chases the killer to the parking lot only to witness him ending his own life in an explosion, and in my opinion was the most unsettling scene in the film. It's just how still he was through the whole process. Didn't even flinch. Anyways, the next day as Dr. Dan is reminiscing about the night before, and not in a good way, we meet Harry's daughter, Ellie. She's checking the body to make sure it was her father that was killed. She finds out, gathers herself, then leaves to have a moment alone. Later that same day, Dr. Dan talks to his work wife about getting some info on Harry. She declines until she realizes how shaken the whole ordeal has him. She agrees, then slides him a kiss before he goes to the bar later that night to catch the Halloween trail. While he's chilling in his empty-ass bar, Ellie approaches him and gives her thanks for him being at the funeral. She also asks him about her father's last words, and when she's told, there's a weird bit of silence, like this scene was supposed to be cut but somebody forgot. The two start their detective work retracing Harry's steps, but before they do, Dan has to call the ex-wife to let her know he's not going to be able to pick up the kids for the day, then hangs up before she has a chance to give him a piece of her mind. Him and Ellie take a long trip to Mira, which is the home of the Shamrock novelty mask, to do some digging on the creator of the mask, Mr. Cochran, and to also retrace Harry's steps. When they get there, they get eyed down more than the black guy at a Cracker Barrel. The two pull up to a motel where they pretend to be a married couple to not draw suspicion their way. As the landlord is getting the room ready, Dan rushes to the lobby and looks at the past tenants, finding Harry's name on the list. As he comes out, a black car passes by slowly, and the only thing I could think in that moment is, drive by! While Dan is making his way to the room, he gets stopped by Buddy and his son that flicks off his mom sometime. Shit, a belt will put an end to that real quick. Not long after that, Ellie and Dan have some porn dialogue to get them to the point of sleeping together. He's like, I'm gonna show you why they call me Honey Dick Dan. When night falls, Dan takes a post-nut walk and comes across a bum that asks to take a hit from his bottle. Now, I don't know where they do this at, but this needs to be illegal, especially seeing the man put both his lips on the rim. Well, that little bit of Shea Portier got the man talking different. He starts to let Dan know about Cochran and how they're always watching. watching. He also teases Dan with the rumors going on within the factory before walking off mumbling to himself. Not long after that, he gets caught up by the suit slaves and gets killed in the most unintentionally gay way. Ain't nothing wrong with being gay, by the way, but if it looks gay, it looks gay. And in the case of this homeless guy's death, the way they put him on his knees with his mouth open, one dude in the front and one dude in the back, then the angle the director chose for this scene specifically screams double penetration. Anyways, the homeless dude gets his head ripped off as we catch it with Ellie talking with Marge about the quality of the mask before dipping to take a shower. Around the same time, Honey Dick Dan gets back to the room and shows Ellie how he got his nickname. While that's going on, in the next room over, this lady Marge is reading a good book when she sees the Shamrock trademark that was dropped on the floor. Right as she picks it up and inspects it, a beam of light hits her mouth, causing it to burn off. Poor lady, she ain't deserve that. What the hell? Is that a spider crawling out her mouth? Anyways, all the commotion causes Dan and Ellie to come outside and see the aftermath of what went on with Marge. The ambulance alongside Mr. Cochran himself is there trying to see what's going on too. And that's when Dan overhears Cochran saying it was a misfire, making him even more suspicious. So the next day, Dan uses the landline to call his work wife to get some info on Cochran, not knowing that he's being listened to the entire time. A little later, him and Ellie go to the office to backtrack Harry's last order. The clerk isn't any help, but right as they're about to walk out, Cochran walks in and invites them alongside Buddy and his family to a guided tour of the factory. While the group is making their way through each of the rooms within the factory, they happen to pass by a door that has what Cochran calls trade secrets. He talks them out of getting into the final processing room, then speaks to Buddy about some business plans, and while he does, Dan pulls Ellie to the side and tells her there's something fishy going on. She believes it more than ever when she catches a glimpse of her father's card, and of course she isn't able to get close because of trade secrets.
Trade secrets.
This leads to Ellie feeling beyond scared and she wants to leave now, but Dan is like, we gotta do something about this. So he goes to the landline to call the Marines, but the line is dead. He nervously walks back to the room only to find that Ellie isn't there anymore. And that seems like that's the least of his worries when he sees a group of suit slaves chasing after him faster than hand sanitizer kills bacteria. Dan goes through a small chase scene, but inevitably gets caught when he sneaks into the factory trying to get away. Fortunately though, it was just one of the many suit slaves there to try to capture him. Dan fights back, but the dude is eating them punches like Thanksgiving dinner. Dan starts to get bested, but only for a short time. He lands a death blow on the guy and realizes it's not an actual person as they leak fluid that looks like honey mustard. This is when the rest of the suit slaves alongside Cochran catch up to Dan. Cochran takes him to the lab where the horror is made and wastes no time going into his evil guy monologue telling Dan that the suit slaves are actually androids he made to do his bidding. He also tells Dan he's been using ancient technology, using this boulder.
It's not just a boulder, it's a rock.
Oh, my bad, he's using the ancient rock to power his mask that activate once the Shamrock Halloween commercial starts to play. An example is shown to Dan when Cochran starts to show the security footage of Buddy and his family in another room within the factory. Buddy's son puts on the mask, and as soon as he does, the commercial starts to play and immediately his head starts to turn to mush. And not only that, spiders and snakes start to manifest as his head decomposes. Not being able to do anything, Dan is in despair seeing this go down, then is put in another room in the factory overnight, which leads us to the next day on Halloween where we see Dan's work wife trying to get in contact with him, but of course he's unable to answer. Looks like Cochran found out where Dan worked and sent an android there to tie up some loose ends with the work wife. Damn, nobody's safe. Many hours later that same night, we find Dan all tied up getting his ear talked off by Cochran, telling him his motivations, and pretty much he wants to create another great Halloween like the one 3,000 years ago, when, according to him, the hills ran red with the blood of animals and children. The motivation is pretty weak, but when Cochran turns the TV on and the score from the original Halloween plays, it was executed pretty well.
Happy Halloween.
I kinda wish they used this score instead of what we got, but I get it. You wanna be different. As Cochran leaves for the final preparations, it doesn't take long for Dan to break free from his restraints. He crawls through the air vents and sneaks to the roof before getting to the phone in the storage room. He immediately calls his ex-wife, and this leads to one of the saddest scenes in the film to me. The man is in clear distress trying to tell her to get rid of the mask, but she ain't trying to hear any of what he's saying, and instead tells him to go to hell before hanging up the phone. Now, I understand she's mad, but can't she at least hear Dan out? Damn. Anyways, Dan is able to slip past the androids, find Ellie, and breaks out the factory, but not before pulling a fast one on Cochran and his team of androids. They start to get killed off one by one, with Cochran being the last to go down with the sinking ship. He gets zapped by this ancient rock, dying in a pretty cartoonish way. But hey, who cares? The movie's almost over. The two flee from the factory as it burns to the ground. When they get into the car, Dan isn't finished trying to get the commercial off the air before time is up. While he's talking to Ellie, she starts choking him. She's almost successful with taking him out, but Dan crashes to a tree, briefly stopping her. trailer. He crawls out the car in distress, then gets choked out again until he could get a hold of a tire iron from the trunk. He reluctantly beats Ellie down, revealing her to be an android. That was probably turned when she got caught back at the motel. Dan is able to get away, but he gets attacked again by Ellie's broken off arm. And by the way that hand is moving, I would have saved it for later. Not long after, Dan rushes to the nearest phone at a mechanic shop to get in contact with anybody that could take the commercial off the air. The movie ends as he desperately pleads while the commercial is playing through the country for all mask-wearing kids to see. Alright homies, that was the end of Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, a film that's gained more of a following in recent years, but unfortunately couldn't get me to be on board. Starting with the positives first, the theme at the beginning before they switched shit up was different and it worked for me. It had a different but familiar enough tone to where it actually helped immerse me in the movie. Another positive for me, which might not be a positive for some, this film is unintentionally hilarious. A scene I can point to is the one at the beginning where Harry kills the android as he's getting choked out. The android sees the car coming but does nothing about it and dies in a goofy way. And the way the android threw his head back as he died had me weak as hell. It kind of reminded me of how people died in that movie In Time with Justin Timberlake. The next positive I have for the film is the bits of gore we do get. It's gnarly. You have a lady getting her lips blasted off and a dude getting a manual nose job. And I don't think I said this earlier, but this was actually a first time watch for me. So I was decently surprised with the different variations of gore we got. And the last positive I have for this movie is the androids themselves. The stiffness of each of their movements added to the creepiness of their sinister actions. Every time they were on screen, I felt a little uneasy because of how abnormal everything about them seemed. And when the one android disposed of himself by fire, it got under my skin a bit. Probably because I seen this documentary on Hulu called The Fire That Took Her. And if you want to see some sad, disturbing shit, check that out. Now, on to the negatives, starting with that damn theme song from the commercial. Don't get me wrong, I thought it was a little nice tune, but it quickly overstayed its welcome with me, to the point I started to get headaches whenever it started to play. And I'm not sure if it was the tune itself, the amount of times it was played, or a mixture of both, but it's a big reason it'll be a movie I probably will never rewatch. Another negative I have for the film is the stiff acting. Besides Tom Atkins from time to time, damn near the whole cast were just as stiff as the androids. And on top of that, the editing didn't help them either. The weird cuts that led to more than a bit of dead air in between a few different scenes, it made me squint my eyes like, the editor didn't see this? And the last negative I have for the movie is that the film was only an hour and a half, but it felt like 2.5. This was a painfully slow film that felt even slower than it should have because of all the reasons I said earlier. Also, nothing really happens that's any type of interesting until either the androids appear or somebody gets killed. And even then, it's not worth being bored until those scenes happen. So with all that being said, alongside not one of the characters being entertaining in the slightest, I'm gonna have to put this just above Boo Boo and put it straight into the snooze fest category. Now, how would I survive the night with the sole survivor, Honey Dick Dan? Well, honestly, as much as I want to say we be conquerors of the night, I think I'd be carried to survival, only because of Dan and his connections. There's nothing I'd be able to contribute besides extra protection from the androids. And you can forget about helping save the country. Like, who am I gonna call to cut the commercial off that's playing across the world? Who do I know? I'm gonna leave that to Dan. So those are my thoughts on Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, a movie that in my opinion helped revive Michael Myers back from the grave. And if you're a Michael Myers fan that's never seen Season of the Witch, I'd recommend this to you so you can understand the franchise a bit more. And maybe it'll add to your appreciation of Halloween Ends, because it did for me, which I'll talk about in that review. Well homies, if you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for making it this far. Let me know what you thought about Halloween 3 Season of the Witch in the comments below, even if you disagree with me. And if you enjoyed this video and have any movies that you want me to cover in the future, put that in the comments below too. Go ahead and put a shamrock mask on the like and subscribe button to see more reviews like this one, and I appreciate y'all coming to a Fright Delight. I'll catch y'all later. Peace.